together. It's not going to be formal. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for you to chat together. I will do some presentation stuff in the between group work or individual work, just so that it all kind of runs together. First thing to say is that Fabian, there is no right and wrong.
Thank you.
Right, you can't possibly go wrong, because person-centred planning isn't something that's kind of like a set of tools that people would suggest have to be done right in order for them to have a right outcome. Person-centred planning evolved out of people realising and understanding that actually that was the very thing that was being counterproductive in people's lives. This the idea that assessments had to be formalised and structured, and that there were certain assessments for certain people who did them. So, an OT made an assessment, or a physio, or a nurse, or a doctor, and that people had assessment after assessment after assessment. And what person-centred planning, where it evolved from, was the idea that perhaps sometimes that missed some very important information about the person themselves, which is why it grew the name person-centred. What's on offer today is an introduction to a range of tools or ways of asking questions that enable conversations to happen between people, to discover important information for people to think about what's important in their lives, what kind of things they may want in their future, how they may need support to actually have those things happen. So nothing greatly technical. There's no big tick box chart in person-centred planning, although some of the tools are a little bit more dense in text than others. So there's a range of things you can turn to. And some people I know have had experience of the Michael Planning for Yourselves workshop and discovered a little bit about what essential lifestyle planning is around. Today I'm going to talk about that and also introduce you to a range of other tools that can be helpful in helping people think and plan about their lives and what kind of support would be useful and meaningful to them. That's all it is. It's not a great big a new invention or technical thing that needs to be applied. It's a way of just thinking of perhaps some useful things to help people have those conversations. Okay, so that's us today. First and foremost, I would like to just kick off with something to get you going, something to get you talking. Because I realise we need to finish by 4:30 because you have to make your way home before 8 o'clock, don't you? 8:45. He said, what time are we going to finish? I am going to get you home in time for the football, aren't I? And at 4:30 I think you'll manage it, not unless you Okay, alright, so first and foremost, it's kick off. We can get into groups of say 3 or 4, and we'll ask you to find out in your group the person whose birthday it is next. Which could be Ray, because he did say it was his birthday today, but I think you might be telling him for it. He likes having birthday. Okay, so find out whose birthday it is next in your small group, alright? And the rest of the group is going to ask that person to tell them about the best birthday that they could imagine having. Right? They're going to discover information about the person in order to map out that person's best imagined birthday. Everything that the person wants to happen on a great birthday, they're going to find out. And I want you to just take time to ask the questions that would discover the information and record the information. So you're going to find a way of recording it as well. Okay? So that it says and paints a picture of how the person would like to spend their best birthday ever. Okay, so just get into groups of natural groups of about 3 or 4, find out whose birthday it is, and then find out what would make their best birthday. To take to the party. What sort of things are you going to buy as a present for the person's birthday?
A time machine, by the sound of it.
A time machine. Somebody else. A time machine.
Suntan lotion.
Sorry?
Suntan lotion.
Suntan lotion, good one. I know. Ooh. Very good.
Champagne.
So I said thoughtful presents. Like little smelly things or a nice man. Tesco's and buy them.
can't draw a full English breakfast, can you?
No, nobody else. So full English breakfast.
Some binoculars.
Binoculars.
Parachute.
Yeah. My point now.
Sorry, sir. Horse parachute. Sorry.
I can get you back 5 times for everyone who waved my way. Other birthday presents then?
Champagne.
Champagne. Okay.
Yes. Flowers. Yay.
Flowers. Nobody buying tickets to go to see England in the final in Lisbon there? Nice person. Go do go. Okay, that's right. So you've really got to know an awful lot about the kinds of things that would suit the person just from asking them about their best birthday. I'm just going to, I know I've got to pick through there. Right, okay. I'm going to read through it just so that you get an idea about Miss X. Miss X was initially referred to mental health services 2 years ago, experiencing a severe and prolonged episode of depression. She was also at this time diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. It is thought that her symptoms are related to negative childhood experiences. Having spent 6 months as an inpatient, Miss X returned to live in her flat, although was unable to return to her job. She has been supported by the CMH team, who have recently noticed a deterioration in her emotional condition and behaviour. Much of her waking time is now spent cleaning and scrubbing her flat, and the neighbours are complaining that her activities are causing a disturbance. Miss X is extremely distressed. She says her life seems to be out of control and she doesn't know how to stop it. She doesn't like to go to any of the social activities or day services provided by local mental health services, although says that if she felt better in herself, she would like to take some evening classes. Okay, tomorrow is Miss X's birthday. Now what are you going to buy for her birthday present? Take her out for the day, yeah? Day out. Feeding stuff. Any other suggestions of things that the sex might appreciate for her birthday? Sorry?
Pen and a piece of paper.
Pen and a piece of paper. Where did you get that from, out of that?
So she can write down what she actually wants.
Right. A list. Right, pen and paper for a list. But that's her birthday present, yeah? The pen and paper. Not the actual thing she's supposed to write about before the present.
She has that for next year.
So she's got to wait the whole year to get anything that might look a little bit nicer.
Birthday card?
A birthday card, yeah.
Encourages to go out for dinner. Dinner. Somewhere quiet.
Yes, although she's from what we know about her, she's struggling to get out at the moment.
That's what I said. You encourage her to go out to somewhere where there's not a lot of crowds. Just a couple of, very small ones.
Into Flora, yeah.
You can, online now you can get restaurants to deliver food, so...
Say that again?
Online you get restaurants to deliver food into people, so...
Delivery food.
Deliver some food brands. She's struggling to go out, have a nice time, and a copy of, called Torchlight, is it? The compendium of all the classes in London.
Right, Torchlight. Big bright. Okay, all right. So what's the difference in terms of how easy it was? How easy did it feel to try and find something that was personal for Miss X, having read that in relation to having had a conversation with your person in the group?
means itself.
It was much harder, yeah. And yet, I mean, really in relative terms, that's just a written statement about somebody, but it's very typical of the sorts of things that tend to get written about people who have mental health issues. It's not a negative description. It's actually one that's quite responsive to her mental health needs. But what we don't get is a feel of who the person is and what's important to her. So we still end up with things that we feel, based on the written material about her mental health condition, we're buying things that we think might help, although we're not very sure, because we haven't found out what's important to her. And that, really, in a nutshell, is what this is about today. It's about finding ways to have conversations with people that just ask the questions to find out and discover what's important to a person, or to help somebody think that through for themselves. It's not always going to be about one person asking a question of an individual or an individual and their friends and supporters. It may also just be a case of enabling people to think a little bit differently and outside the boxes of the kinds of things that we've asked in the past, or the kinds of things we've observed and recorded in the past. This is just a way of complementing all that information and suggesting that actually what we've kind of missed a little bit along the way when we've written about people and their mental health stuff is who the person is underneath and what's important to them. And what kind of things would make a different kind of future. So person-centred planning is an additional complement to an awful lot of things that are currently being thought about and questions that are being asked in terms of how we support people. How we support people who are perhaps stuck. How we support people who maybe want to think about moving on to a different-ish kind of a lifestyle, but as the person that they are, you know, with the things that they come with and the things that the experiences that they've had, as opposed to a kind of an idea that once we've got rid of the thing that gets in the way, the mental health issue, people can go on to have another kind of a life again. Yeah. Oh, right. That's a question. Okay, so just back. The report that Fabian referred to on page 43, paragraph 35, says that in meetings with the social exclusion unit, people with mental health problems and those working in the mental health field often raise concerns that health and social care staff's low expectations, negative attitudes, and assumptions about the abilities of people with mental health problems inhibited progress. Now that's a fairly negative statement, and it kind of is a little bit of a blanket one, because it implies that it's a service versus people kind of situation. It is a very generalised statement. It doesn't make any kind of reference to individuals, and the whole report actually does pick out, as Fabian's already said, there's 5 references to Bromley. It's constantly picking out places where that's not the case, where people have high and raised expectations, and that where attitudes are respectful of people and do have a vision that people will want to move on and want to take a view that their lives could change in some way to make it more comfortable. All right, and person-centred planning is a complement to all of that, the changing expectations, the changing roles. And it is also going to be something that does challenge where that sort of thing exists. Okay, so that we can actually help people to have conversations that where we can gain an understanding of people having a vision that their lives can and will change, and that will change according to how they want it to, how they want to live life, what sort of things that they would feel would make a better future for them, what's important to them, as opposed to a prescriptive, look, it would be better if you did it this way, it would be better if you didn't do that sort of stuff, because then you would have a different kind of a life. Person-centred planning acknowledges the individual and listens to what the person's got to say about how that change could happen, and listens to the person about how support could be offered to help that change happen. Not overnight, very dependent upon each individual. It's very much a case of one person at a time, listening carefully and helping people also to develop a vision for themselves. Okay, just a brief bit about the history of person-centred planning tools and approaches, where they've come from, and the reason why mental health services are now starting to think in terms of the person-centred planning approaches. By and large, the field of learning disability in the UK has been the leader in using and adopting person-centred approaches. 2001 saw the production of the Value People White Paper. That was in response to maybe about 10-ish years of people in the UK looking at how person-centred planning tools could be used to work with people with a learning disability, one person at a time, to discover about things that could be different in their lives too. Okay? However, it's not exclusive to people with learning disabilities, it's just the field that it's kind of grown out of. The people who have led the way in person-centred planning approaches come out of North America and Canada. John O'Brien is one of those people who, and his initial work centred on something called 5 accomplishments. As we saw institutional care reduce in the UK, we saw the development of community-based care, and we also saw the advent of person-centred approaches. It's not all straightforward. What person-centred approaches began with was the 5 accomplishments that people need to be respected for their view and their vision of their lives, that they need to have choice in order to be able to move on to different lifestyles of their preference and choice. That relationships are really important, and that was born out of people who have learning disabilities or identify difference, experiencing social exclusion and having a kind of a poverty of relationships in their lives. And that people need to have community presence in order to be able to have the chance to be included. Although presence doesn't automatically mean inclusion, as they've discovered with community care, because that's one of the major difficulties out in terms of those particular services, that people did become present, but it didn't actually mean participation took place. So we have to also look at the issues around why exclusion does happen and why people still tend to sit on the margins of what's happening in communities. And also people needed help and assistance and support around the skills that they may need to develop or may need support with in order to be present and to participate. And likewise, that's developed into thinking about the skills that communities and the awareness and knowledge that communities and community groups, individuals, neighbourhoods also need to have in order to welcome people and have them be included. Okay, so that it's spread out from the initial 5 accomplishments around individuals. Yes?
Could I just mention for people who are not aware that Community Options residential homes do operate a system based on John O'Brien's work, which has been in place now for, what, 5 years, Tracy?
Yeah, actually.
A bit longer than that, yeah.
So the 5 principles, and they're quite useful because it isn't complicated, it's not a great big checklist. It says be aware, be sensitive to, and think about how to help those things develop. So that's the kind of history, and as I've already mentioned, that that doesn't necessarily limit it to thinking about people with learning disabilities. Obviously, person-centred approaches are about people. It's not about a particular group. In fact, actually, that would be work in a converse way, if you like, to be saying, well, that only applies to certain people. We are thinking about how people's lives may be supported, if they do require some support with them, to be ones that they prefer to live, ones that feel okay. And what we do know is that groups that experience exclusion often have, they're often people who, for some reason or other, they sit outside of things like participation and relationships. They've lost, perhaps, or never had good, strong, solid relationships. And person-centred planning asks us to look at those things. So we're not talking about something that sits separately from anything to do with the current thinking around inclusion and recovery-based approaches. It's a complement. It's actually probably the starting point in the sense that, first of all, we need to know from the person. And this is about having those conversations. And these are just some tools to help us have those conversations with people. Like, what's the best birthday you could imagine? And out of that, to try and discover what that means around what's important to people. What are the things that make them tick? What are the things that are big drivers in their life? What things are missing that actually are really important and need to be there for a good quality life for the person? Right, hello. Okay, the foundations of person-centred planning then. Brian and Lovett wrote that the term person-centred planning refers to family approaches to organising and guiding community change in alliance with individuals involved in services, their families and their friends. There is no right or wrong as to how any of this happens or how anything gets recorded, although you might, as time goes on, find that some people seem to get a bee in their bonnet about it. Actually, in reality, it's probably best and healthiest to have an attitude of it can't possibly belong to services. Person-centred planning is not a service tool, can't be a service tool, in the sense that if we allow it to belong as a tool of services, we then lose the essence of it being driven by the individual. And the whole point of person-centred planning is that the individual, along with all the people in their house, they want to help them with their thinking, and that may mean people who are close to them, family members, neighbours, friends, whoever, or perhaps none of those people, just the person themselves, have to be the people who give the information, who have their information recorded and have their outcomes seen as the driving force behind support. We can't do person-centred planning and then say, yes, but we think as a service we know that we really ought to be doing this before you do any of that. Person-centred planning belongs with each individual that chooses to engage with person-centred planning. And if we let it become a service tool, we lose the essence of it. Unfortunately, that will be one of the things that does happen. It does in learning disability services already, because unless you actually go out there and try working in that way and looking at how support could be driven and organised by what's heard from the person, then you're going to, naturally, there's going to be a gravitation towards putting on a service goal, putting in a service angle. And it does happen because unless you actually work with it and feel it moves, feel how it works, feel how it affects or impacts on the way that a person's life can change, then you're going to miss it and just have services to fall back on, service goals to fall back on. So that's one of the questions that needs to be addressed by any group of people that are looking at the development of person-centred planning, person-centred approaches in their service network, because it is an easy hole to fall into. I've come across lots of people already who are working in learning disability services who do a person-centred plan and then use it in the same way that maybe what used to call the individual program planning system. You have CPA to think about in a similar way. And then use it so that next year it comes out for review and it comes out with a draw. Person-centred planning can't belong in a drawer, it can't belong in a service office, it belongs with the person in operation daily, because that's what's being lived. That kind of lifestyle is being walked towards, the kind of lifestyle was first described by the person. The things they want to support around that are important to them on a daily basis are being walked towards on a daily basis in their support. So it has to be active out there. It's not a document that exists. It can be a record. There can be records made that help and support daily life, but it doesn't belong in a service or to be wheeled out the next year on an annual review basis. There are lots of different ways to actually look at and monitor what's happening in the way of support. Is it happening? Are things being walked towards? But it's not within the review process. It possibly, if you want to think about how it could support a review process, it could be that person-centred planning is the discussion, is the whole way of thinking about and describing the person's life and any future desired lifestyle and the support that goes with it that underpins a review process or something that's more formalised, like the CPA process or the ICT or whatever, so that it then feeds into community care assessments in learning disability are starting to change, just starting to change after many years, to respond to person-centred planning, in that now areas that have caught on and work in this way will have a person-centred plan, information sharing arena, which then forms what gets written on the community care assessment. Nothing that gets written on community care assessment won't already be mentioned in the plan anyway, but it informs it and then that's the statutory arena for information to be recorded, but it comes as a reflection of the plan as opposed to being a this is what we think you ought to be doing, this is what we think you need kind of document. Okay, you've got this in your pack, but there are 5 key features that are recorded in Valuing People as being the features of person-centred planning. Because Valuing People is a document in learning disability services that has said we are going to adopt person-centred approaches in the support that we provide. And the fundamental part of that would be that person-centred planning takes place. So it helps us because it identifies exactly what's being suggested within the framework of person-centred planning. The person is at the centre. Family members and friends are all partners in planning. Okay, so it lodges person-centred planning right for the person and the important people to them. And we're going to do an exercise later that looks at how to discover that information to people. The plan shows what is important to the person, and that's just now or it could be in the future. There's different planning tools that help assist with that. And it identifies strengths, gifts and talents, rights and choices, and what support is needed by a person. It's a positive planning tool. It doesn't identify anything that, in thinking about an individual and what kind of life they may want to have, or what kind of things suits them in terms of daily support today. It's a positive planning tool. It doesn't identify incapacity. It looks at strengths and gifts and capacity and potential, and works on those things. It doesn't deny that some people may have things that they need to consider that are important around life issues, health and safety issues. And again, there are different ways of thinking about that within the context of a positive plan. The plan helps the person to be part of their community. It helps the community to welcome and include them. So there's very clear indication that this is about helping people to have lives in community, lives in family, in neighbourhoods, in context of being people who use shops and leisure facilities and education and people who have the capacity to participate and contribute to their communities, as opposed to the move from the more passive recipient of services kind of role and identity. So it's very much around helping people to acknowledge and understand what kind of identity and community life they want to have, and to help them to do those things that are important. And the plan is promised by everyone involved to continue to listen, learn, make things happen, and then put the plan into action to help the person to achieve what they want to have in life. So 5 key features, very straightforward, nothing complicated about them. Does anybody have any questions?
Just coming back to your bit about where it fits with the CPA and the other things we're doing, and trying to have this balance of where it is integrated in some way. It strikes me that this is so important that we've got to put time and resources into it, and everybody's got to understand that from an organisational point of view. How do you actually make sure that you've got it identified enough, if you like, so that it does complement everything else you're doing? Because it could bring about so many different results in different ways that you need to monitor and measure and bring it in to decide what else needs to change in terms of your professional remit and what other people are doing, aren't you? So is it going to come up later on about the balance and how to try and get it right?
Well, I think that's something that
you have to find out
at a local level. You'll find out for yourselves, and it's about the things that are in place to help it happen.
Right.
Yeah, as opposed to just kind of drifting and hoping it will happen. There may be some very organised steps that people who want to see it change in the way that people are assisted to think about their lives and to find out, how people understand an individual and what's important to them.
Because in a way, it's a bit different from learning disabilities because they're more static in terms of their improvements and the time that they spend in any one service, where mental health, you've got more transition and freedom perhaps for a good number of people. So where it's applied and how it's applied, I I suppose could be the fluid thing as well, isn't
Yes,
it?
and I think it's early days, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the history of person-centred approaches and person-centred planning tools, as you well know, lies in the learning disability field. But actually, there's an awful lot of work across the UK starting to happen, early steps around this feels like it could be useful in mental health thinking and services. It feels like it actually is something that people would welcome because there is a massive influence of people who are not rejecting but suggesting that the more traditional services don't exactly help people out the loop. And as Fabian's diagram showed earlier, it's an opportunity for people to see themselves walk away from a service arena back towards versatile, towards a life that makes sense to them in community and in relationships. So, I mean, it is a learning curve for the mental health field, definitely. And learning disabilities is totally different in the sense that, yes, people do tend to be more static, and we do have a difficulty that more traditionally, people with learning disabilities have been organised and controlled, if you like, to be more static. So people's opportunity to move out of services isn't all that widespread. So we are talking about a totally different arena. However, the principle around finding out what makes somebody tick and helping them to have that kind of lifestyle is a format that should apply to all, well, it does apply to all of them.
And what happens when the severity of someone's illness means that they're really unable or unwilling to engage in personal planning? You know, people just sit and stare at the wall.
Yeah.
When this happened to me, I couldn't be broken down to sitting and staring at the wall. So I can't imagine that anybody would have engaged me at that stage in my illness.
In anything?
In anything.
Yeah. Well, the answer lies within yourself. Would you have wanted somebody at that time to try and break into there and do that?
Looking back, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you're the person with the experience and the expertise to know the possible ways to actually help that happen, and the respectful ways that that possibly is done. But obviously it is going to be far more difficult with somebody that is having a huge amount of difficulty in engaging. In terms of listening well to people, we have to find some way of communicating. Otherwise, we have quite different to listen to. Behaviours are, a massive amount of the information that we need to get from people. But we have to be able to interpret behaviours as well. And we're not always going to be necessarily writing our interpretation, which is why one of the key features is that family members and friends are full partners in planning. Yeah. Because, in terms of thinking about, and that may not always be as productive as people may want, but you use the people that are closest to somebody and love them.
You use them and then later on bring the person fully into it.
Yes. Yeah, because the people who love somebody know them, and I know that there is a view that sometimes that might not be helpful to have somebody who's as close as that, but the real core information about what's really helpful and meaningful to somebody in a situation as pulled back as that is going to come from people who love somebody and know somebody really well, not from somebody who is a distance away and doesn't have that information to hand, because I don't know what to buy in sex for her birthday. Sorry, but I don't. I can think of a few things, but I'm really stuck. Whereas by the end of your small conversation with somebody around their birthday, you've got a vision of something that would make sense to them for their birthday. We had a beauty voucher and a massage. Somewhere in that conversation, somewhere in the information that was shared in that conversation, you discovered something about what was really important to that person. Yeah, but I still don't know what I'm buying sex. I don't think, I don't think any of us really truly would have known what would have made good sense to her, what would have been in her heart as important, because we can't find that information from that kind of report on somebody. So we need to get to grips with things that are important, and sometimes we will use people around who know and love and care about somebody in that way, because the value of the information is going to come from that.
What is the difference between person-centred approach and planning?
Person-centred approaches is a kind of it's a blanket term for thinking about services that respond to what we know makes good sense to somebody. The distinction is that person-centred planning is the way that we discover the information from somebody. The reason that I make a distinction about it is because some people have taken person-centred planning and seen that that's it, job done. We've planned with somebody, so we're all right now, we know exactly what makes sense to them. A whole wealth of approaches, though, looks at, well, what does that mean in terms of the way we then respond and provide somebody says to us, I need to be out there doing a job, being in work would be really important to be able to get work back, to recapture the stuff that went with being in a valued work role. If somebody said that to us, and then we said, oh, great, yeah, okay, that's fine, I'm going to be right, yeah, oh, yes, I understand all of that. And then the only response we were able to manage was a I don't know, a horticultural project or a day service, drop-in service, or we're not responding in a person-centred way to what we've heard. So we've done the planning, great, but we haven't got everything else back into the children, so now we're going to try and find a way. There are people who can help connect with the job centre, the back-to-work schemes, whatever is happening in the local area. So the work that's already happening, you see how it complements it. It's just the person-centred planning is to discover the initial information from somebody, to find out and get to grips with what actually is going to make good sense to be doing. And it's extremely effective in the sense that it then pinpoints exactly what will make a difference in somebody's life and so break the cycle. But the person-centred approach has to be a whole systems approach, which is pretty much, what we saw with Fabian's slide is what is already starting to happen is that whole systems thing, that person-centred planning then underpins the whole connection with recovery-based approaches and social inclusion, or the understandings and skills that go with helping people to connect or make reconnection with their neighbourhoods, with relationships, with communities. Yeah?
Just one more. I agree wholeheartedly with the approach. My concern is that the raise expectations and the family or friends may not actually be able to be in a position to be able to provide support that the person wants.
Yes.
How do you get over that?
The tools are designed to actually have the conversations that will open up things in terms of acknowledging what's important to somebody. But they're all, we'll go on to look at them, they're all action-based. And that's the point at which those discussions around what's possible in the way of support responses happens and takes place, as opposed to leaving somebody to keeping wanting, because they'll have those expectations anyway, they'll have those hopes. It's a way of action planning to say, but that's not going to happen that way, but we can still walk towards those things that are important to you, because we can try and find another way of that support taking place. Yeah, but it's a negotiation around heading towards the things that are important to them. And that's where I want to take you now, is to just go back into your small groups and to write down for yourselves, as on an individual basis, the 5 most important things to you in your life, okay? And then to share some of the thinking around, so what are the kind of areas of life that we seem to knock around in that are the most important to us? What are the things in life that tend to be our focus for our attention, for our desire to have a comfortable life, things that are most important? What kind of things? Is it relationships? Is it work? Is it money? Is it travel? What kind of areas do we tend to focus most heavily on in terms of things that are most important? That's important to you in your life, and trying to work out what kind of main areas of life that tends to cover. What areas of life not discussing in the group? Family, yeah. The family life. A lot revolves around family and the relationships that go with that. Our close, key relationships, ones that we would consider are our rocks, our anchors in life. And also perhaps some that are a little bit further away, but are still key, important family relationships. So what other areas?
Financial security.
Financial security.
Health might come into it.
Yeah. So another key area is health. Home, where you live, yeah.
Social network.
Yeah. So friends.
Most likely.
Yeah, I think so.
family, put that up there. Right, did he say there's a case for relief, that's it, yeah. What? The future. Yeah. That kind of fits with security quite a lot, isn't it? Yeah.
Culture.
Culture. So faith, belief, culture. Somebody said jobs, didn't they? Yeah. Jobs, work. Any others? We've got social life, yes, but we can, not always fun, so we can specify that. Hobbies, interests, things we do, yeah. That last one, hobbies and interests. Things that we do.
Right, come on.
It's a driving force for some people. We have to accept that. Yeah. We've got to keep it in the realms of reality. So, family relationships. Understanding in terms of other people understanding you, or understanding the world understanding. Okay?
Contentment.
Travel. Interest, hobbies, learning, activities, learning, yeah. Something like that. Sorry, what was that? What was there?
I think contentment. Because whatever we have, it's a human nature.
Right.
We'll never be happy. You always, grass is greener on the other side, and you always wish you've got something that somebody else has got. Something in your life, I suppose, isn't it? I don't know why we do it, because if you compared your life, or you're able to sometimes, you'd say, no, I don't want that now. I've had a chance to look at that person's life, because I've got more in mind than that person has.
Right. I think it's hard to understand how other people actually on the outside value what you've got.
Yeah.
So looking and understanding about what you actually value in life is an important exercise. And your 5 topmost tend to fall into a core area. The core areas tend to be the ones you first came up with: family and relationships, health, jobs and work, where you live is an important one, relationships and friendships, social life, faith, beliefs and culture, and then the social stuff around activities and what sorts of things we do. But there are some real key areas, aren't there, around what are important to people, and relationships are a fundamental one, and work is also an identity around, having self-esteem and some value attached to the roles that we have in life, are all ones that are most important things in life, tend to revolve around having some status, having some value to other people. And nothing's different for any of the people that we support. And the person-centered planning tools that we're going to look at through the day are actually around asking questions, very simple, straightforward questions, and having discussions that enable us to understand and have an understanding of how we can help somebody work on the things that are important in their life, to either recapture them, re-establish them, as happened for the first time, or for people to have support to walk towards lives that make sense to them. As from the point of view of we are a person here today, and there are some things that we want to change and look at. The most important things to us. Identify which are the fundamental ones that need to be looked at first. It's no point. There is absolutely no point in doing anything, any kind of therapy or behaviour mod program or activity program or social inclusion, dare I say it, program, with somebody who absolutely is unable to move unless we look at the most important thing, which is causing them the most distress, which could be around lack of relationship or the loss of a very key relationship, or that they don't have some fundamental strong relationships in their life. If that's really the most important thing to them, then our work needs to focus there before they can then move on to other things. So we need to
identify, by exploring with the person, what are the key things that really demand our support. First and foremost, as priorities, and then into the future, as people move on and move towards a more desirable lifestyle.
The second point, building what Stuart was saying before, is that there comes a time when this is a needed exercise, this time is not a needed exercise, and including myself, as my recovery is built strength, I can see all of that effect in part of my life. In the early stage of my illness, I doubt I've just come to the 4 words, but over 4 ideas.
Yeah.
So what is the right time to do it? You know, because you're going to get a different snapshot at different stages of something.
Yeah, and that again is a part of the thinking in terms of doing it with one person at a time on a very individualised basis. That as you become more familiar with the thinking around what the tools can do, you will see that sometimes there are points where it makes no sense whether you even go down the road of thinking that a person-centred planning tool might help the situation or might help the person to develop a vision of what sort of support would make best sense to them. There are some times when actually there's something other needs to be worked on. I have worked with people in terms of facilitating person-centred planning who it absolutely was not going to be the first port of call to go into a great big planning tool exercise with them because something didn't sit right in the early thinking. And it's usually around strength of relationships. Very, very isolated people, particularly those who have very negative reputations, people who perhaps have been in institutional lifestyles for a long time and their only relationships are with transient staff members. It's not going to make good sense to be trying to help them to vision what would be a different kind of lifestyle or more preferred kind of lifestyle if theirs has been very pulled back into a building where they've been little sets so that they can't go out without more than that they need at least 2 members of staff to go out and there's never 2 members of staff available so their whole life focuses around the building that they live in and the support staff that support them and maybe some on-site day services. There is absolutely no real starting point to help you think about community life from people who don't have an experience of it or don't have a vision of it. So for people in that sense, then the starting point has to be how do we find people in their life that can help us to first step actually get the initial vision going as to what would make better sense to them from where they're actually sat at the moment. For example, I've just been facilitating some person-centred planning that I've asked by people who've been very similar situations. And one person in particular, whilst I was asked to facilitate person-centred planning, I had to go back and say, look, this is not person-centred planning. What I'm suggesting to you out of this is that this person actually, first and foremost, needs some people in his life to gather around him who will be committed to actually thinking about what would perhaps, what would be a better kind of a lifestyle, what would make better sense than this very impractical situation in an institution. Because at that point in time, he had such a negative reputation, people didn't go near him, and he'd lived like that for a long time. That a big planning tool wouldn't, because there's lots of thinking about what would relate, but it wouldn't relate to this person in this situation at this point in time. So the more familiar you get, the more you get easier about working with it. So I just used some of the initial planning tools, which are going to have a break, because you start with a relationship now. I just used that. So I can just get people around you to think about, look, this is the state of play around relationships and key people in his life. This is the quality of the relationship. This is what's happening or not happening, as the case may be. And to get people initially thinking about, hey, this is crazy. This is crazy that this guy's doing like this. Particularly since an awful lot of the additional information that's coming forward was around this person really wanting relationships. This person was really saying quite clearly, people are the most important thing to me. Which would make sense because people are messing around. So yeah, it's not something that gets applied to everyone. It's certainly the most basic thing that we should be paying attention to is to whether somebody wants to. And if they don't, we don't. Because this is person-centred, we can't go doing something to somebody and they say, it's person-centred, they're going to like that. No? How person-centred would that be? And I'll tell you a little story before we go to break. Just a little story around because people do get very confused around being person-centred. And we were in a group of people. There was a group of there's 3 friends. I was one of the group of 3 friends, and a couple of other people who were trying to get to grips with a very drunken kind of grips with person-centred planning one night. So we were staying at their house, and one of my friends is very, very broad Liverpudlian. And me and my other mate were taking a bit of the mickey out of me because we were doing that and all of that, spit the dog stuff. And he said, oh, I've quit, I'm going to bed. And after he went to bed, and the other 2 were sat there, and said, that's terrible that you take Mickey out of this. That's terrible that you take Mickey out of this that time. And we were like, what? That's all right, it's okay, he's fine with it. No, he was getting upset then. I'm like, he wasn't getting upset, we do it all the time, he likes it. It's part of who we are, we know each other really well, we do that sort of thing. No, he was definitely getting upset, that's terrible that you do that sort of thing, and he's supposed to be your friend. And honestly, believe us, we make it kind of like, we know this guy really, really well, believe you me, well, why did he go upset then? Well, because he was tired, because he wasn't a bit funny, that enough, And the woman was sat just to the right-hand side of me, and later she leapt off the seat that she was sitting in, and she charged out, and about 3 or 4 minutes later she came back, she sat down and she said, well, I did the person-centred thing, because I wasn't asking if he was upset.